So the planning onion model is directly reflected in the strategic change management plan. Within the project planning, we're going to look at the combination of static and hybrid activities. Within release planning and iteration planning, we also look at a set of activities that are appropriate for that phase of the planning. So let's have a look at some of these. So in project planning, the static micro activities are activities that are not going to be um, iterative. They're activities that are done generally upfront at the start of the project, as we are launching and we're doing initiation and planning the very big launch of the project. So some of these activities are defining and preparing the sponsor. We spoke previously about the sponsor and the importance of having a project sponsor and a sponsor that has got the ability to dedicate the time or the commitment required. In some cases, there's a sponsoring committee where you cannot have one person that is the sponsor. If you're in a project that does not have a sponsor, you are going to struggle later on. So it's very important to put in a structure that works for that particular project. Holding a working session to align and mobilize. So this is part of your mobilization process. Defining the project's purpose and identity. So the why. Why is the project being done? Why is the project so important? And the why is critical because this is what resonates with the heart of a person. Why are we doing this and why are we in this together? The why also answers the what's in it for me, as people can relate to the project in their own way. Assess characteristics of the organizational culture and its effects on change efforts. So we spoke previously that the culture is something that is important to understand as far as possible, understanding the characteristics and understanding how it's going to affect the rollout. If we are implementing Agile for the first time in a very traditional waterfall organization, it's going to be met with some shock and resistance, and it's important to understand that right from the beginning. It changes the strategy you use to implement, and it changes the approach you may use for engagement. Defining the roles and responsibilities of the project team and making sure that you have a RACI matrix that reflects the roles and responsibilities. This is particularly helpful when you have new team members joining in the middle of the project. Adjusting the physical environment to the project needs. This is quite an important one. The physical environment has a huge effect on how people work in the project and how they respond to the project. So if you have got a project that's in the basement of a leaky building, that is not the ideal environment to motivate or to sustain a project team. We know that in the environment at the moment, remote working is a big reality for a lot of teams. And what is important in that aspect is understanding the individual needs of the team members. Are they in a space where they can actually work? And are they struggling or are they doing okay? So these aspects are important to understand. The teams that are returning to the office or returning to site, the change management process has to be in place to ensure the safe return of team members. Assess the predisposition to changes and their impacts. So we're talking about the maturity here of the organization and predisposition to large changes and the impact of those large changes. If you're implementing in a very rigid organization that has got a low maturity level, the impact is going to be huge. And it's important to understand that and to put in the right mitigating actions. Plan and carry out the project kickoff event. So this is a very critical step in launching the project. And in the kickoff event, you will also include all the relevant stakeholders that are going to be involved, generally speaking, in the project, your decision makers, your key sponsors, your suppliers, all of your key partners, learning and development, human resources, group well-being. I would include all of those because at some point later, they will have a role to play. And being part of a kickoff is also seen as quite a big compliment, from a project perspective. If we look at some of the hybrid activities, so when we refer to hybrid activities, we're talking about activities that are started in the project planning phase, but the content of the activity will change as the project goes on. So activities like mapping and classifying stakeholders are very critical in all the steps within a project. Identify and plan actions to handle antagonism and engagement factors, identifying alternatives and performing knowledge management, developing the change management strategic plan, and activities related to the acquisition of products or services. So these are activities that you will come back to. So we don't map stakeholders only once. The stakeholders are going to change depending on the release cycle of the project, and you will need to do a continuous mapping exercise. The all of the other factors mentioned, especially when you talk about knowledge management. Knowledge management is something where the knowledge needs to be harvested at the different stages of the project. In some cases, the team member is going to roll off and a new team member is going to come in. It's important to harvest that knowledge at the right point in time to make sure that the information is available to the new team member that may be coming in. And if we look at some of the dynamic macro activities, and these are activities within release planning and iteration planning, which are very cyclical and very iterative. So reviewing lessons learned, each time we do a lessons learned review for release planning, we may be including new lessons, and this includes lessons from past projects, but it also includes lessons from that particular iteration or sprint. Identifying and aligning stakeholders. So we talked about the fact that this is something that you will continue to revisit. So you map your stakeholders, but you continue to go back to understand whether the position of that stakeholder has changed. Planning the team's assignment and development. It's very important to motivate the team and each team member by making sure that they understand how long they're going to be on the project, and also that they understand what happens to them after the project. Many team members come in from their normal business role and they're very concerned about what's going to happen when they get back to their role. So, having these conversations with human resources, with the line managers, is a very important part of ensuring that there's psychological safety in the team and ensuring that the team member is feeling less anxious about their role in the project. Establishing the change management action plan. So, this is the action plan that has got the key activities, the detail of what needs to happen within the sprint planning, within the implementation of that particular product.